I'm a booktuber and a wheelchair user, so that's how I roll. Yeah, there was no chance I was not going to make that joke, so thought I'd just get it out of the way straight away. Anyway, this is the BookTuber Role Tag. It was created by Allison from Allison Annotated, and I was tagged by Gavin from Genre Books, Nadine from Widely Reading, and Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading. I'll tag all of them in the description so you can go and find their channels as well, and I'll include links to their versions of this tag. I'll also include a link to a version by Pat from Book Chat with Pat, just because I saw that one and thought it was a particularly good response to the tag. But what is the tag? Well, it's a series of prompts asking booktubers how they view their role on BookTube. There's 7 prompts to get through, so let's get on with it, shall we? Prompt number 1 is, how do you view your role as a booktuber? Examples might be as a critic, a curator, an influencer, an entertainer, an educator, etc. Well, I think the role of booktuber to some extent encompasses most of those things. I would hesitate to call myself an influencer in the kind of modern internet sense of the word, but I suppose being someone that talks about books on the internet, I am to some degree hoping that I will influence you to read some of the books that I love. If you find a book through my talking about it and you're tempted to read it, then I guess in some way that does make me an influencer, as icky as I feel about that word. I think I wouldn't consider myself particularly an educator. I don't have much of a background in education, as one of the later questions will give me more cause to discuss. But I guess to some degree I am sharing my knowledge about books, and occasionally films and music and other sorts of stuff like that. I'm imparting some of that knowledge to you, but it's not in a structured way that is particularly academic or educational. I'm also not formally a critic, but I am, I suppose, by reviewing books here, in some way criticizing them. I am doing more than, I hope I'm doing more than just talking about whether or not I liked a book. I'm also talking about how the book worked, what its place is in the context of when it was written, and ways that you might read it now through different kind of critical lenses, but again in a kind of informal way. I'm not trained in that at all. It's just something I'm kind of trying to feel my way through as a largely self-taught critic. And I suppose in some way I am a curator, in that I am curating my own experience of reading. I am picking the books that I want to read, and sometimes kind of finding books that work together and comment on each other in some way. But again, it's very much my own personal taste that dictates the collection that I curate here. So, I don't know how much of a curator you could really call me. As for an entertainer, well, I am a sucker for a stupid pun, and some people seem to enjoy my videos, so I hope they're entertaining. I hope they're also somewhat educational or enlightening. But I think that Pat from Book Chat with Pat said it best when she described herself as a book friend. I certainly view Pat as one of my book friends, and I hope that if you're a regular on this channel, then you will also view me as a book friend. I really value the conversations that we have in the comments, and that, I think, more than anything, is what keeps me making these videos. That is the most rewarding aspect of it for me. So yeah, let's just have a nice book chat in the comments, and yeah, hopefully make the world a slightly better place by just being decent to each other and having nice conversations. And I hope that doesn't sound too insipid. Prompt 2 is, do you have any educational background in literature or literary criticism, either formal or self-directed? And, if you're comfortable sharing, do you have any other educational or professional experience that you bring to bear on your reviews? Well, to put it simply, no, not really. I only studied English up to GCSE level, so no further education. As soon as I could ditch the subject at school, I did. Not because I didn't like the subject as a subject, I just didn't really get on with the way it was taught at my school by the teachers who taught it. So yeah, I kind of feel like I missed out on a certain amount of formal education, by choice, but also by circumstance. But when it comes to self-directed learning, I think a fair amount of my reading is that, to some extent. I mean, I also read for enjoyment and entertainment, but, you know, I like to read at least something, you know, on a regular basis that is somewhat kind of intellectually challenging and stimulating, stuff that is considered significant or a classic in some way. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Shakespeare, and I read a fair amount of Shakespeare just by choice, and that includes reading all the sort of scholarly essays and footnotes and stuff that's included in the books, because I like to have that kind of context, and deepen my appreciation more than I could by just reading the play in isolation. You know, I'm currently slowly reading through a few kind of chunky tomes, like the New Oxford Book of English Verse. I've recently started very slowly reading through the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. So, you know, I think that to some extent I do try to let at least some of my reading be kind of self-directed education. But that said, I like to also have some space for books that are just entertaining or emotionally fulfilling in some way. So, you know, I'm not purely reading for self-education, but it's certainly a factor. But my professional experience is very much limited to music performance. That's the thing I do when I'm not doing this. And I guess maybe that I can bring some of that to bear when I review certain books. If they are about music, then I might be slightly better placed to comment on them than someone who has no knowledge of music. But yeah, I don't have any professional experience of writing criticism or education or anything like that. So yeah, I'm just feeling my way. Question 3 is, do you typically do any research on either the book or the author before you review a book? And typically not a lot, maybe a little bit. I mean, I will certainly read all of the supplementary stuff that's included in a book. I won't just read purely the novel and not the end notes. So I'll learn a little something about most authors that way, a little context. I will pay attention to when a book was published, and I might look up a little bit more about it, but generally not much more than the Wikipedia article, unless I'm really, truly fascinated. I suppose Shakespeare is someone that I have read more deeply about, and it's very easy to find plenty of very deep and detailed books about Shakespeare. And as I said, I tend to get editions of his plays that include essays and footnotes and stuff. So certainly for Shakespeare, I do read a bit about the plays and their context within his career, and you know what may have inspired them and what he may have been saying with his plays, or at least what certain scholars have theorized he may have been saying. But yeah, generally speaking, I don't research exhaustively. I will do a cursory bit of research, and only if something really fascinates me will I really kind of dig in. So, you know, I love Terry Pratchett, so I've read a fair bit about his life and career. Same with Ursula K. Le Guin, same with Shakespeare. But, you know, I just recently read The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, and aside from one article that Pat very kindly sent me when it popped up in her feed, I haven't read much about J.D. Salinger as a person. So, yeah, I was purely responding to that book on its own merits and with some consideration of when it was written. But, yeah, not really any knowledge of J.D. Salinger, although, from what I gather, knowledge about J.D. Salinger is quite hard to come by. Question 4 is, do you focus your reviews more on the objective qualities of a book or more on your subjective opinions about it? Well, I try as best I can to balance those two sides. I've sort of developed a pattern in my book reviews, like in my monthly wrap-up videos, that I will start by discussing the objective facts about the book. So, you know, what's it called? When was it published? Who wrote it? Is it part of a series? And then a bit about the premise of the book. What's the basic gist of the plot without too many spoilers? Then I will get into my personal reaction to the book. What I got from it, what thoughts did it provoke in me, what feelings did it stir up, and what did I think of it? Did I enjoy it? I like to think that even if I wasn't crazy about a book that I'm discussing, I will share enough about what its merits may be that you may kind of get the sense that, oh, Ali didn't like that, but I might. I try not to totally trash books because I know that someone else might really love it even if I didn't. But I certainly do like to discuss my personal reaction to a book, because that's the only reaction that I can have. And I think that the more you know a reviewer, whether they're a professional reviewer or a booktuber, the better you know their personal taste and their perspective, the better idea you'll have on whether you're going to actually agree with what they say. So yeah, I try to balance that, but I certainly do. I do acknowledge my own feelings towards the book and also my own biases. I mean, I've DNF'd books in the past because some of the ableist tropes in them just really annoyed me and bummed me out. That may not be something that you personally find if you are not a disabled reader like I am. But that was my experience of, say, Don't Look Now and Other Stories by Daphne du Maurier. Whereas I know a lot of people really love Daphne du Maurier on BookTube. And, I'm not going to criticize anyone for loving her, but I did not get on with that book at all because of my perspective as a disabled reader. So, yeah, my perspective and my personal reaction to a book is certainly a big factor. But as I say, yeah, I try to balance it. Question 5 is, have you ever received a free book or advanced reader copy from the author? And if so, did it have any impact on your ability to honestly review the book or on how you felt about it? Well, in short, no. I've never received an ARC or ARC advanced reader copy, and I don't think I would want to. I wouldn't enjoy the feeling of obligation that would come with receiving a review copy. I only have a limited amount of time and energy to put into both my reading and making videos. And I feel like receiving a review copy and being kind of obligated to read it and review it in good time would put just more pressure on me than I would want. So yeah, I don't intend to ever accept a review copy. Who knows? Maybe one day that will change, but I doubt it. Question 6 is, do you review every book you read? Are there any reasons that you might read a book but choose not to review it? Well, I try to review everything that I read. And when I say review, I mean discuss it in my wrap-up videos. I don't make individual review videos for every book I read. And some months I don't make an individual review video at all. I just put it all in the wrap-ups. There have been months in the past when I have not managed to make a wrap-up video, and so therefore there are books that I have read during my time on BookTube and not reviewed them because I just couldn't make a video then. Yeah, I don't think there's any reason why I would choose not to review a book unless it was just I couldn't make a video for energy reasons. And finally, question 7 is, how do you feel about the fact that many people now primarily consume book reviews by hobbyists on BookTube rather than professional critics? What is lost? What is gained? Well, what is gained for me as one of those hobbyists on BookTube is that people care to listen to my opinions and care to watch my videos. That's certainly good for me. and good for this little bookish community here on YouTube. I do think that with professional critics, there is a kind of there's a barrier to entry. You can expect that someone who reviews literature or films or music or anything in the arts, anyone who reviews the arts professionally, they are going to have, well, they certainly should have, a very solid grounding of knowledge. They should have read a lot of books if they're reviewing books, seen a lot of films if they're reviewing films, and whatever discipline they're reviewing, they should have experienced a lot of what that has to offer, and have a deep knowledge of the history of literature or film or whatever, and that barrier to entry doesn't really exist on BookTube. Whether you have read, all the classics and you can confidently quote and cite like centuries and centuries of literature, or whether you have only read like a handful of books but you have some strong opinions about them, either way you can start a book channel and make these videos. I think there are pros and cons to that, but certainly for the people that I follow on BookTube, I think most of them do have a solid grounding in book history, not necessarily in like canonical classics, but certainly if someone specializes in a particular genre, then they have a very good understanding of the history of that genre, the way it's developed over time, and they can talk on that with some level of authority, albeit kind of self-appointed authority. But I think that with both professional critics and hobbyists, there's a certain amount of just trust involved. I think that you have to get to know a critic or a booktuber, have to get to know their taste and their perspective, and only then do you kind of get a better understanding of where they're coming from and whether you're likely to agree with their assessment on a book or a film or an album, whatever. I mean, I think I've read more professional film criticism than book criticism. So I have an idea of what Roger Ebert's film taste was, as opposed to Mark Kermode, for example. So, once you get to know a critic's taste, whether they are a professional or a hobbyist like me, I think that is when you know how much stock to place in their opinion. You might enjoy reading or watching their reviews, even if you're not necessarily going to agree with what they say. Whereas for booktubers like Pat from Book Chat with Pat or Mark from The Book Thing, I can make a pretty safe bet that if they rave about a book, I'm probably going to like it too. Not 100% of the time, but certainly there's a better chance than not. So yeah, I guess that's neither lost nor gained. It's just that's just the way criticism works, whether it's professional or amateur. But I suppose what is lost is just that sort of professional standing and the idea that someone can can be paid for their expertise, which, you know, I think they probably should be. And I know that some people do make money off their BookTube channels, but certainly not like enough for a career, really. So I think that's sad that that basically a kind of a career has kind of stopped existing to a large extent. Certainly when it comes to like journalism and like newspaper reviews, like most newspapers don't really do literary reviews anymore. And yeah, I think that is a shame. But, you know, I think that what is gained with this kind of hobby version is just the interactivity of it, because it's more of a discussion than a broadcast, you know? We can have discussions in the comments of the videos, and we can kind of get to know each other as a community and you know, do stuff together, like collaborative projects and stuff like that. That, you know, that's not really something that happens much with like professional critics. That I think was more of a, I think was more distanced, I suppose. Whereas this is, yeah, more on a more personal level, for better or worse. So, yeah, I suppose what is gained is just the fact that I get to do this, and so do many of my BookTube friends. And, you know, I think that's good, even if what we've lost is also sad. The bit at the end. So that was the BookTuber Role Tag. I'd love to hear in the comments if you have any thoughts on any of these prompts, and I'll also tag a few channels in the description because I'd love to hear some of their responses. But you know, no pressure. If you don't feel like doing the tag, just consider the tags a channel recommendation. Anyway, that's about it from me today. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I will see you when I see you.